The air on the planet was thin, almost suffocating, and Leela Carter adjusted her breathing mask as she stepped carefully over the jagged rocks. The ground beneath her boots was a strange mix of black stone and shimmering dust that sparkled faintly under the dim light of two distant suns. Around her, the ruins stretched endlessly, broken towers, crumbling walls, and strange symbols etched into surfaces that seemed to hum with quiet energy. It was beautiful and eerie at the same time. Leela had been separated from her team during their exploration of this alien world. A sudden landslide had cut her off from Ryan and the others, leaving her alone in this vast, silent place. She tried not to think about how far away she was from safety or how much danger she might be in. Instead, she focused on moving forward, scanning the area for anything useful, a sign of her crew, a clue about the civilization that once lived here, or even just a way back to the ship. As she turned a corner between two crumbling pillars, something caught her eye. At first, it looked like a shadow, but then it moved, slowly, deliberately. Leela froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the small tool belt strapped around her waist. There was no weapon there, only gadgets meant for collecting samples and analyzing data. Not exactly helpful in a fight. The figure stepped closer, revealing itself. It wasn't human. Towering nearly twice her height, its body gleamed like polished silver, reflecting the weak sunlight in sharp flashes. Its limbs were long and angular, each step deliberate and measured. But it was the eyes that held her attention. Two glowing orbs of deep blue light, piercing through the gloom like searchlights. They locked onto hers, and for a moment, Leela felt exposed, as if every thought in her mind was laid bare before this creature. "Why aren't you scared, human?" The voice came out low and resonant, filling the empty space around them. It wasn't hostile, but there was an edge to it, a challenge. Leela swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. Fear wouldn't help her now. "I'm not scared because I don't know enough to be afraid," she replied steadily, her voice clear despite the lump in her throat. "Being scared won't get me home." The creature tilted its head slightly, studying her. Up close, she could see intricate patterns carved into its metallic skin, swirling designs that shifted subtly as it moved. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, pressing down on her like a weight. Then, finally, the creature took another step forward. "You are different from the others of your kind," it said, its tone unreadable. "Most would tremble before me. Most would beg for mercy." Leela shook her head. "Mercy doesn't come from begging. It comes from understanding. If you wanted to hurt me, you would have done it already." For a heartbeat, the creature didn't respond. Then, unexpectedly, it let out a sound, a low rumble that might have been laughter or frustration. Leela couldn't tell which. Whatever it was, it made her grip tighten on her belt, though she kept her face composed. "I am Kel," the creature said after a pause. "And you?" "Leela," she answered simply. Just Leela. Kel's glowing eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing her words. He seemed curious, perhaps even intrigued by her lack of fear. Or maybe he was trying to decide whether she posed any threat. Either way, Leela knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when so much depended on staying strong. Little did she know, this encounter was only the beginning of something far greater and far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. Kel continued to study Leela, his glowing eyes flickering as if trying to see past her calm exterior. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncertain. Finally, he spoke again, his deep voice echoing in the empty ruins. "You speak boldly for someone so small," Kel said, tilting his head slightly. "Do you not fear what you do not understand?" Leela took a slow breath, choosing her words carefully. "Fear doesn't help me survive. It only clouds my thinking. I'd rather focus on what I can control, like staying alive and finding my way back to my team." Kel's metallic brow furrowed, the intricate patterns on his skin shifting subtly. He seemed puzzled by her answer, as if it didn't align with what he expected from humans. Your kind is known for its fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of each other, fear of yourselves. Why are you different? Leela hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She decided honesty was her best option. I faced danger before. Being scared wouldn't change anything. It would just make things harder. Besides, you haven't given me a reason to be afraid yet. Cale straightened, his towering frame casting a long shadow over her. For a moment, Leela thought she might have pushed too far. But then he let out another low rumble, almost like a sigh. You are unusual, Lila. Most beings who come here do so with weapons in hand, ready to fight or flee. You carry neither. I'm not here to fight, Leela replied firmly. I'm here because my people want to explore, to learn. We're trying to understand what's out there beyond Earth. That's why we came to this planet, to see if we could find answers. Cale's gaze intensified, his blue eyes glowing brighter. And what answers do you seek? Knowledge, power, resources. All of those, maybe, Leela admitted, but also something more. A chance to connect with others, to share ideas, and grow together. Humanity isn't perfect. We make mistakes, but we're learning. We're trying to become better. Cale didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned away, pacing slowly around the ruins. His movements were fluid, almost graceful despite his size. Lila watched him carefully, noting how the strange symbols etched into the walls seemed to react to his presence, glowing faintly whenever he passed by. After a few moments, Cale stopped and faced her again. Your words are bold, but actions speak louder. Your kind has traveled far, leaving destruction in its wake. Other species have seen your wars, your greed, your hunger for power. Why should I believe you are any different now? Leela felt a pang of guilt at his words. She couldn't deny that humanity had done terrible things in its history. Wars, pollution, exploitation, all of it was part of their story. But she also knew there was more to humanity than its flaws. We've made mistakes, she said quietly. Big ones. But we've also built cities, created art, cured diseases, and dreamed of reaching the stars. We're capable of great things when we work together. And yes, we've hurt others along the way, including ourselves. But we're still learning. Isn't that worth something? Cale regarded her silently, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he reached out one long metallic arm and touched the wall beside him. The glowing symbols flared to life, projecting images into the air, scenes of battles, crumbling planets, and fleeing ships. Lila watched in awe as the holograms played out, showing the rise and fall of civilizations. These are the stories of those who came before you, Cale explained. They sought power, wealth, and control. In the end, they destroyed themselves, and sometimes others with them. My people, the Verithi, have witnessed such cycles many times. It is why we remain cautious. Leela nodded slowly, absorbing what he was saying. I understand your caution. If I were in your place, I'd feel the same way. But not every visitor comes with bad intentions. Some, like us, are just looking for a chance to grow. Cale stared at her for a long moment, his glowing eyes searching hers. Then, without warning, he stepped closer, towering over her once more. You claim to seek knowledge, Lila. Very well. Let us see if your curiosity outweighs your fear. Before she could ask what he meant, Cale gestured for her to follow him. He moved toward a narrow passage between two crumbling structures, his steps deliberate and steady. Layla hesitated for only a second before following, her heart pounding in her chest. Whatever lay ahead, she knew it would test her resolve, and perhaps even her faith in humanity itself. As they walked deeper into the ruins, the air grew colder, and the hum of energy around them grew stronger. Lila couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something far greater than she had imagined. But one thing was certain. Turning back wasn't an option now. The narrow passage twisted and turned, its walls lined with more of the glowing symbols that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Cal's movements. Leela followed closely behind him, her boots crunching softly against the uneven ground. The air was colder now, biting at her skin even through her suit, and the faint hum of energy grew louder with each step. She couldn't help but feel like they were walking into the heart of something ancient and powerful. Cal didn't speak as he led the way, his towering frame casting long shadows in the dim light. Every so often, he would pause and glance back at her, as if checking to make sure she was still there. Leela kept her pace steady, though her mind raced with questions. Where was he taking her? What did he mean by testing her curiosity? And why had he chosen to spare her instead of turning her away, or worse? Finally, they emerged into a wide chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow high above them. In the center of the room stood a massive structure, a crystalline pillar that shimmered with an inner light. It looked both beautiful and alien, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as Leela stared at it. The hum of energy was deafening here, vibrating through her body like a low-frequency hum. Cal stepped closer to the pillar, his metallic hand brushing against its surface. The light inside flared briefly, responding to his touch. "This," he said, his voice echoing in the vast space, "is what many have sought. A relic of those who came before, the creators of this place." Leela's breath caught in her throat. She took a cautious step forward, her eyes fixed on the glowing crystal. "What is it? What does it do?" Cal didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to face her, his glowing eyes piercing through the dimness. "It holds knowledge, secrets about the universe, about life itself. But it also holds power. Power enough to reshape worlds or destroy them." Leela felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced back at Cal, her voice steady despite the unease growing in her chest. "And you're showing this to me. Why?" "Because I want to understand you," Cal replied. "Your kind seeks the stars. But for what purpose? Do you seek to learn, as you claim? Or do you seek to dominate, as so many others have?" Leela hesitated, her gaze returning to the crystal. The weight of his question settled over her like a heavy blanket. Humanity's history was filled with examples of both moments of brilliance and discovery, but also greed and destruction. How could she promise that her people wouldn't repeat the mistakes of the past? "I can't speak for all of humanity," she admitted finally. "But I know we're capable of both good and bad. We've hurt others, yes, but we've also healed. We've destroyed, but we've also created. If we're given the chance, maybe we can prove ourselves worthy of something greater." Cal studied her silently, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he reached out and touched the crystal again. This time, the light flared brighter, and holographic images began to appear around them. Scenes of war and devastation played out in vivid detail. Planets burning, ships exploding, civilizations collapsing under the weight of their own ambition. "These are the consequences of unchecked power," Cal said, his voice heavy with meaning. "Many races have fought over relics like this one, believing they could control its secrets. In the end, they only brought ruin upon themselves." Leela watched the images with a mixture of horror and fascination. She wanted to look away, but she forced herself to keep watching. Each scene was a reminder of what could happen if humanity failed to rise above its worst instincts. Finally, the images faded, leaving the chamber silent once more. Cal turned to her, his glowing eyes locking onto hers. "Tell me, Leela, if your people were given access to such power, what would you do with it?" Leela swallowed hard, her mind racing. She knew her answer mattered, not just to Cal, but to everything that might come next. "I'd hope we'd use it wisely," she said slowly. "To heal, to build, to learn. But I can't promise that everyone would agree. That's the risk with any tool. It depends on who wields it." Cal nodded, as if her honesty satisfied him. A truthful answer. Few would admit such uncertainty. Before Leela could respond, A distant sound broke the silence, a faint crackle of static followed by voices shouting her name. Her heart leaped. It was Ryan and the others. They were looking for her. Cal's head tilted slightly, his sharp hearing picking up the noise as well. "Your companions approach," he said, his tone neutral. "They will not reach us easily. These ruins are guarded." Leela frowned, worry creeping into her thoughts. "Will you stop them?" Cal's head tilted slightly, his sharp hearing picking up the noise as well. "Your companions approach," he said, his tone neutral. "They will not reach us easily. These ruins are guarded." Leela frowned, worry creeping into her thoughts. "Will you stop them?" Cal didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gazed at the crystal, his metallic hand resting lightly on its surface. "That depends on you, Leela. Prove to me that your kind is worth trusting, and perhaps I will let them live." The weight of his words hung in the air between them. Lila knew she was running out of time. Whatever happened next, she would have to act quickly and carefully if she wanted to save both her crew and the fragile trust she had built with Cal. The distant voices grew louder, echoing through the ruins as Ryan and the others drew closer. Lila's mind raced. She knew her crewmates wouldn't stop until they found her, but she also knew the dangers they were walking into. The Vairathi defenses Cal had mentioned weren't just a warning. They were real. If Ryan and the others triggered them, things could go very wrong, very quickly. Cal watched her silently, his glowing eyes unreadable. He didn't seem impatient, but there was an intensity in his stance that made it clear he expected an answer soon. "Your companions are persistent," he said finally, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "Do you wish to save them, Leela, or shall I deal with them as I see fit?" Leela shook her head firmly. "They're here because they care about me. They don't know what they're walking into. Please, don't hurt them." Cal tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You ask for mercy on their behalf, yet you cannot guarantee they will act wisely. Why should I trust them when I barely trust you?" "Because I'm asking you to," Layla replied, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. "If you want proof that humanity can be better, then let me show you. Let me handle this. I'll make sure they don't do anything reckless." For a moment, Cal didn't respond. Then, slowly he nodded. "Very well. But know this, if they threaten my people or this place, I will not hesitate to act." Relief washed over Leela, though it was short-lived. She turned toward the direction of the voices, raising her hand to activate the communicator on her wrist. Static crackled before a familiar voice came through. "Leela, is that you?" It was Ryan, his tone a mix of relief and urgency. "It's me," she replied. "I'm okay, but listen carefully. You need to stop where you are. The ruins are dangerous. There are defenses. You can't just barge in here." There was a pause on the other end, followed by Ryan's skeptical reply. "Defenses? What are you talking about? Are you alone out there? Did something happen to you?" "I'm fine," Leela said quickly. "But you have to trust me. Turn off your equipment and wait where you are. I'll come to you." Another pause, longer this time. Then Ryan's voice came back, softer but still tense. "Leela, we're not leaving without you. Whatever's going on, we're here to help." Cal's sharp gaze bore into her, and Leela knew she had to tread carefully. Her crewmates meant well, but their instincts might get them into trouble if they didn't understand the situation. Taking a deep breath, she spoke again. "Ryan, please, just stay put. I'll explain everything when I get there. Trust me. I've got this under control." After a long silence, Ryan finally agreed, though his reluctance was clear. "All right, but don't take too long. We're not losing you out here." As the communication ended, Lila let out a shaky breath. She turned back to Cal, who was watching her closely. "They'll wait," she said, "but I need to go to them soon. If I don't, they'll try to find me anyway. And that won't end well for anyone." Cal's metallic brow furrowed, the patterns on his skin shifting subtly. You place great faith in these humans, yet you know their nature as well as I do. They are unpredictable. Leela nodded. That's true, but they're also loyal. They came all this way to find me, even though they didn't know what they'd face. Isn't that worth something? Kale didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured toward the glowing crystal in the center of the chamber. Before you leave, there is one more thing you must see. He touched the crystal again, and the light inside flared, casting shimmering reflections across the walls. This time, the images that appeared weren't scenes of destruction. They were glimpses of creation, planets forming, stars igniting, civilizations rising from humble beginnings. It was breathtaking, a stark contrast to the horrors Leela had seen earlier. This is what lies on the other side of power, Kale said quietly. Creation or destruction. It is always a choice. Remember that, Leela, when you speak to your companions. Leela stared at the images, her heart pounding. She understood what Cal was trying to show her. The crystal wasn't just a relic of knowledge. It was a test, a reminder of the responsibility that came with discovery. And now, she had to carry that lesson back to her crew. Thank you, she said softly, looking up at Kale. I'll make sure they understand. Kale nodded once, his expression unreadable. Go then. But remember, your actions will speak louder than your words. Prove to me that your kind is worthy of trust. With that, he stepped aside, allowing her to leave the chamber. As Leela made her way back toward the passage, she couldn't shake the weight of what she'd seen, or the challenge ahead. Her crewmates were waiting, unaware of the stakes, and somehow she had to convince them to tread carefully in a place where one wrong move could mean disaster. Leela moved quickly through the ruins, retracing her steps toward the spot where Ryan and the others were waiting. The weight of Cal's words stayed with her, echoing in her mind like a warning. She knew she had to be careful. Her crewmates weren't used to dealing with beings like Cal or understanding the delicate balance they were walking into. One wrong word, one impulsive action, could undo everything she'd worked so hard to build. As she reached the edge of the chamber, she spotted them. Ryan, Megan, and Jake huddled together near a cluster of broken pillars. They looked tense, their faces pale under the dim light of their headlamps. When they saw her approaching, relief washed over their expressions, but it was short-lived. Ryan stepped forward first, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. Leela, he said, his voice tight. Are you okay? What happened out here? Why didn't you respond earlier? I'm fine. Layla replied calmly, raising a hand to stop him from bombarding her with questions. But we need to talk. There's something you need to understand before we do anything else. Megan glanced around nervously, clutching her scanner. What's going on? Did you find something? Or someone? Leela hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I found someone. His name is Cal. He's not human. He's part of a species called the Verithy. They'd been watching this planet for a long time, protecting it. Protecting it from what? Jake asked, his tone skeptical. Us. Leela nodded slowly. In a way, yes. This place isn't just ruins. It's a treasure trove of ancient technology and knowledge. But it's also dangerous. If we're not careful, we could trigger defenses that none of us are ready for. Ryan crossed his arms, his expression hardening. So what are you saying? We just leave? After everything we've been through to get here? No, Leela said firmly. I'm saying we need to approach this differently. Kale gave me a chance to explain who we are and why we're here. I told him we're explorers, not conquerors. But if you guys start acting like invaders, brandishing tools, scanning everything without permission, he'll see us as a threat. And trust me, you don't want that. The group fell silent, the gravity of her words sinking in. Megan shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the others. So, what do we do? Just sit here and hope he lets us go. We earn his trust, Leela replied. That's the only way we're getting out of here safely, and maybe even learning something valuable while we're at it." Ryan frowned, clearly unhappy with the idea. "You're asking us to put our lives in the hands of some alien we know nothing about. How do we even know we can trust him?" "Because he hasn't hurt me," Leela said simply. "He could have, but he didn't. Instead, he showed me things that made me realize how much responsibility comes with discovery. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about proving that humanity can be better than the mistakes of our past." Jake let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "This feels like a lot to take in. Ancient aliens, hidden tech, moral lessons. It's like something out of a story." "It doesn't matter if it feels like a story," Layla shot back. "It's real. And if we mess this up, we might not get another chance." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right. Say we play along. What's the plan?" Leela relaxed slightly, grateful for his willingness to listen. "We stay calm and respectful. No sudden moves, no scanning or digging unless Cal says it's okay. And most importantly, we show him we're here to learn, not to take." Megan nodded slowly. "Okay, that sounds doable. But what happens if things go south? What's the backup plan?" "There isn't one," Leela admitted. "Not really. This has to work. If we can prove ourselves, maybe Cal will let us leave peacefully. And maybe we'll even gain something from this experience. But if we fail..." She trailed off, letting the implications hang in the air. Ryan exchanged a glance with the others before turning back to Leela. "All right, let's do this your way. For now. But if anything feels off, we're pulling the plug, understood?" "Understood," Leela said, nodding. She felt a flicker of hope, though it was tempered by the enormity of what lay ahead. Leading her crewmates back toward the chamber, she couldn't shake the feeling that every step brought them closer to a crossroads, one that would shape not just their fate, but perhaps humanity's future as well. The group moved cautiously through the ruins, their footsteps muffled by the strange, shimmering dust that covered the ground. Lila led the way, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. She could feel the tension radiating from her crewmates. Ryan's jaw was clenched. Megan kept glancing over her shoulder, and Jake held his scanner tightly, though he resisted the urge to turn it on. They were trying to follow her instructions, but she knew their nerves were stretched thin. As they approached the chamber with the glowing crystal, Cale emerged from the shadows, his towering frame silhouetted against the dim light. The sight of him made Megan gasp, and Jake instinctively stepped back, his hand tightening around his scanner. Ryan, however, stood his ground, his expression unreadable as he stared up at the alien. "You brought them," Cale said, his deep voice resonating in the empty space. His glowing eyes swept over the group, lingering on each of them before returning to Leela. "Do you believe they are ready to face what lies ahead?" Leela swallowed hard, stepping forward slightly to bridge the gap between her crew and Cale. "They're here because they care about me, and about our mission. I've explained the situation to them. They understand the stakes." Cale tilted his head, studying Ryan and the others with an intensity that made them visibly uncomfortable. "Understanding is not enough. Actions define intent. Tell me, humans, why have you come so far into the stars? What drives you to seek what belongs to others?" Ryan hesitated, unsure how to respond. He glanced at Leela, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. Taking a deep breath, he spoke. "We came because we want to learn. Humanity. We've made mistakes, sure, but we're trying to grow, to become better. We thought this planet might hold answers, things that could help us understand the universe and ourselves." Cal's metallic brow furrowed, the intricate patterns on his skin shifting subtly. "And if the answers you seek require sacrifice, if they demand more than your kind is willing to give?" "It depends on the cost," Ryan admitted. "But we'd weigh it carefully. We're not perfect, but we're learning to think before we act." Cale didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned his attention to Megan, who flinched under his gaze. "You carry tools," he said, gesturing toward her scanner. "Why do you bring such things into sacred spaces?" Megan stammered, clutching the device closer to her chest. "I just wanted to study, to understand. I didn't mean any disrespect." Finally, Cale looked at Jake, who had been quiet until now. "And you," he said, his voice low. "What do you seek here?" Jake shifted uncomfortably, scratching the back of his neck. "Honestly, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to see something incredible. Something bigger than myself. Is that wrong?" Cale studied him for a long moment before speaking. "No, curiosity is not a flaw. It is a beginning. But curiosity without wisdom can lead to ruin." The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Leela felt her heart pounding as she watched her crewmates struggle to process what Cale was saying. She knew this moment mattered. It wasn't just about earning his trust. It was about proving to him that humanity could be more than its past. "They're telling the truth," Leela said finally, stepping forward again. "They're scared, yes, but they're also hopeful. They want to do the right thing, even if they don't always know what that is. Isn't that worth something?" Cale turned his glowing eyes back to her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like he might dismiss them entirely. Then, slowly he nodded. "Very well. You have earned a chance to prove yourselves. But know this, if you betray my trust, there will be consequences." Relief washed over Leela, though it was short-lived. She knew the hardest part was still ahead. Turning to her crewmates, she spoke quietly but firmly. "Stay calm. Follow his rules. This is our only shot." As Cale led them deeper into the chamber, the glowing crystal at its center pulsed brighter, casting shimmering reflections across the walls. Lila couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and dread. Whatever happened next would change everything, not just for them, but perhaps for all of humanity. The chamber seemed to grow quieter as Cale led them closer to the glowing crystal. Its light pulsed in steady rhythms, almost like a heartbeat, and Leela couldn't shake the feeling that it was alive. Watching, listening, waiting. Her crewmates stayed close behind her, their earlier fear giving way to cautious curiosity. Even Ryan, who had been the most skeptical, seemed to soften slightly as he took in the sight of the ancient relic. Cale stopped a few feet away from the crystal, turning to face the group. "This is no ordinary artifact," he said, his deep voice filling the space around them. "It holds knowledge beyond your understanding. To access it requires respect, patience, and wisdom. Do you believe you are ready?" Leela glanced at her crewmates, gauging their reactions. Megan looked awestruck, her eyes wide as she stared at the crystal. Jake seemed uneasy but fascinated, while Ryan's expression remained guarded. Stepping forward, Leela spoke for the group. "We're here to learn, not to take. Show us what you think we need to see." Cale studied her for a moment before nodding. He reached out one long metallic arm and touched the crystal. The light flared brightly, and holographic images began to appear once more. This time, however, the scenes were different. Instead of destruction or creation, they showed moments of connection. Beings from different worlds meeting, sharing ideas, working together to solve problems. It was a story of unity, of hope. "These are the moments that define civilizations," Cale explained. "When differences are set aside and trust is built. Your kind has the potential for such greatness, but also for great harm. Which path will you choose?" Ryan frowned, stepping closer to get a better look at the images. "You're showing us this because you want us to prove ourselves, right? But how do we know you're not just testing us to see if we'll fail?" Cale's glowing eyes narrowed slightly. "I am not your enemy, human. I am a guardian. My duty is to protect what remains of those who came before. If I believed you were beyond redemption, you would not be standing here now." The words hit hard, silencing any further questions from Ryan. Leela felt a surge of gratitude toward Cale for his patience, though she knew the test wasn't over yet. As the images faded, Cale turned back to the group. There is one final step. To truly understand the weight of what you seek, you must face yourselves. Before anyone could ask what he meant, the crystal's light shifted again. This time, it projected reflections, not of distant worlds or ancient beings, but of the humans themselves. Each member of the group saw their own face, magnified and surrounded by swirling patterns. The images didn't move, but they seemed to pierce through to something deeper, forcing each person to confront their fears, doubts, and desires. Megan gasped softly, clutching her arms as if trying to shield herself. Jake took a step back, his brow furrowing as he stared at his reflection. Ryan clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. Only Lila stood still, meeting her own gaze without flinching. She had already faced this moment within herself, on the day Kale first asked her why she wasn't afraid. "What is this?" Ryan demanded, his voice rising. "What are you doing to us?" "It is not an attack," Kale replied calmly. "It is a mirror. To move forward, you must see who you truly are and decide who you wish to become." For several minutes, no one spoke. The chamber was silent except for the soft hum of the crystal. Slowly, the intensity of the reflections began to fade, leaving the group shaken but thoughtful. Megan wiped her eyes, while Jake let out a shaky breath. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, looking unsettled but determined. When the light finally dimmed completely, Kale turned to Lila. "Your companions have faced the mirror. They have seen their flaws and their strengths. Now it is up to them to choose their path." Lila nodded, glancing at her crewmates. "We've seen enough to know what's at stake. We won't forget this." Kale regarded her silently, then gestured toward the exit. "Go. Return to your ship. Share what you have learned. But remember, the universe is watching. Choose wisely, Lila Carter." As they made their way back through the ruins, Lila felt a strange mix of relief and unease. They had survived the encounter, but the lessons they had learned would stay with them forever. The journey home wouldn't be easy, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The journey back to the ship felt longer than Lila remembered. The ruins, once intimidating and mysterious, now seemed quieter, almost peaceful. Her crewmates walked in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Ryan led the way, his steps deliberate but slower than usual. Megan kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting Kale or some unseen force to appear behind them. Jake trailed at the back, his hands shoved into his pockets, his head down. Lila stayed near the middle of the group, watching them carefully. She could see the weight of what they'd experienced etched on their faces. Kale's mirror had forced them to confront parts of themselves they might have preferred to ignore. It wasn't easy, but she knew it was necessary. They couldn't face the stars, or beings like the Verethi, without understanding who they truly were. When they finally reached the edge of the ruins, the sight of their ship brought a wave of relief. It was battered from the crash landing, its metal hull scorched and dented, but it was still standing. Home, however temporary, felt within reach again. Ryan stopped just outside the ship, turning to face the group. His expression was serious, his voice low. "All right, let's talk about what just happened back there." Megan nodded quickly, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "That crystal thing. Those images, it felt like it was looking right through me, like it knew everything I've ever been ashamed of." "It wasn't judging you," Lila said gently. "It was showing you the truth, about yourself, about humanity. We can't grow unless we're honest about where we've gone wrong, and where we can do better." Jake let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head. "I didn't sign up for this kind of soul-searching when I joined the mission. I thought we were here to explore, not to take some cosmic personality test." "That's exactly why we're here," Layla replied firmly. "Exploration isn't just about finding new places or things. It's about learning, not just about the universe, but about ourselves. If we don't understand our flaws, we'll keep repeating the same mistakes." Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're right. But it's hard to think about all that when we're still stuck out here. We need to focus on getting home." You're not wrong, Leela admitted. But we also can't forget what Cal showed us. That crystal, it wasn't just a relic. It was a warning, and maybe even an opportunity. Humanity has a choice to make. Will we use what we learned to build bridges, or will we destroy ourselves trying to grab power? The others fell silent, the gravity of her words sinking in. Megan broke the quiet after a moment, her voice soft but thoughtful. Do you think Cal trusts us? After everything. I think he gave us a chance, Leela said. He didn't have to. He could have turned us away or worse. But he didn't. That means something. Ryan nodded slowly, his expression hardening with resolve. Then we owe it to him, and to ourselves, to prove we're worth that trust. When we get back to Earth, we tell everyone what we saw, what we learned. No sugarcoating it. Humanity needs to hear the truth. As they climbed aboard the ship, Leela felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The journey ahead would be difficult, both physically and emotionally, but they had taken the first step. Together, they had faced something greater than themselves and survived. Inside the ship, the hum of the engines starting up filled the air. Lila strapped herself into her seat, gazing out the window at the ruins one last time. In the distance, she thought she saw a faint glow, a shimmer of light that might have been Cale watching them leave. Whether he was guarding the planet or simply observing, she couldn't say. But she knew one thing for certain. Their encounter had changed them forever. As the ship lifted off the ground and soared into the sky, Leela leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. The lessons they had learned would stay with her, a reminder of the fragile line between creation and destruction. Humanity's future depended on the choices they made next, and she intended to make sure those choices were the right ones. The journey back to Earth was long and quiet. The ship drifted through the vast emptiness of space, its engines humming softly as it carried the crew toward home. Inside, the mood was subdued. Each member of the team spent most of their time alone, lost in thought. The encounter with Cale and the visions from the crystal had left a lasting mark, one that neither words nor distance could erase. Leela sat by the small observation window, staring out at the endless sea of stars. She felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude for having survived, determination to share what she'd learned, and a deep sense of responsibility. Humanity wasn't ready for the kind of power Cal had shown them, but maybe it never would be if they didn't start changing now. That realization weighed heavily on her mind. One evening, Ryan approached her, pulling up a chair without saying a word. For a moment, they simply sat together, watching the streaks of light pass by as the ship moved through hyperspace. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. Do you think anyone will believe us when we get back? Leela turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. Some will. Others might not. But it doesn't matter how many people believe us. It matters what we do next. If even one person listens, understands, and acts, then it's worth it. Ryan nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the stars. It's hard to imagine going back to normal life after all this. Everything feels smaller somehow, less important. It is smaller, Leela said with a faint smile, but that doesn't mean it's unimportant. Every choice we make matters, no matter how small it seems. Even the tiniest actions can ripple outward, shaping the future in ways we can't predict. Megan joined them a short while later, holding a cup of tea in trembling hands. She looked tired, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. I keep thinking about those images, the ones the crystal showed us, about humanity's mistakes. Do you think we're doomed to repeat them? Not if we don't want to, Layla replied firmly. The past doesn't have to define us. We can learn from it, grow beyond it. It won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. Jake wandered in soon after, flopping down onto the couch across from them. He let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through his messy hair. You know, I used to think exploration was about finding cool stuff. New planets, weird creatures, shiny tech. But now, I'm not so sure. Maybe it's more about finding ourselves, figuring out who we are, and who we want to be. Leela smiled faintly, nodding in agreement. That's exactly what it is. Exploration isn't just about discovering the universe. It's about discovering humanity. And sometimes, that means facing things we'd rather avoid. The conversation continued late into the night, each of them sharing their thoughts and fears. By the time they finally went to bed, there was a new sense of unity among them. They weren't just a crew anymore. They were a team bound by an experience none of them would ever forget. When the ship finally entered Earth's orbit days later, the sight of the blue planet brought a wave of mixed emotions. It was beautiful, fragile, and full of potential, but also scared by centuries of conflict and greed. As they prepared to land, Leela gathered everyone in the main cabin for one last talk. "We've been given a chance," she said, her voice steady and clear. "A chance to change things, to make humanity better. Not because we have to, but because we choose to. Whatever happens next, let's remember why we started this journey: to explore, to learn, and to grow." The others nodded, their expressions resolute. When the ship touched down at the spaceport, reporters and officials were waiting, eager to hear their story. Cameras flashed, questions flew, and microphones were thrust forward. But Leela remained calm, speaking plainly and honestly about what they had seen and learned. Not everyone believed them, not at first. Some dismissed their account as fantasy, while others accused them of exaggeration. But over time, their message began to spread. People listened, not just to the story of Kale and the crystal, but to the deeper truth behind it. That humanity stood at a crossroads, and the choices they made would shape the future of their species, and perhaps the entire galaxy. As Leela watched the world react to their story, she allowed herself a small smile. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. And sometimes, that was all you needed to change everything. Weeks turned into months after their return to Earth. The initial excitement and skepticism surrounding Leela's story began to fade, replaced by debates, discussions, and quiet reflection. Some people dismissed it as science fiction, an entertaining tale spun by a weary crew longing for fame. Others, however, took it to heart, seeing in Leela's words a mirror of humanity's struggles and potential. Leela herself became a reluctant figurehead for change. She gave interviews, spoke at conferences, and met with leaders who were curious, or cautious, about her message. At first, she found it overwhelming, but over time, she grew more confident in sharing what she had learned. Her voice carried weight because it wasn't just hers. It belonged to Ryan, Megan, Jake, and even Kale, whose wisdom echoed through every word she spoke. One evening, as she stood on a stage addressing a packed auditorium, Leela felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like a second skin. The crowd was diverse: scientists, politicians, students, and ordinary citizens, all gathered to hear her speak. She took a deep breath, letting the murmurs die down before beginning. "We went into space hoping to find answers," she said, her tone calm but firm. "What we found instead were questions about who we are, what we value, and where we're headed. We saw the best and worst of ourselves reflected back at us, not in mirrors, but in the ruins of civilizations that came before. Their stories weren't so different from ours." She paused, scanning the sea of faces. Some looked skeptical, others intrigued, but most seemed genuinely curious. The universe is vast, full of wonders and dangers alike. But the greatest challenge isn't out there. It's within us. If we want to reach for the stars, we must first confront our flaws, heal our divisions, and choose to be better than we've been. Her words resonated deeply, sparking conversations that rippled across the globe. Schools began teaching lessons inspired by her account, encouraging students to think critically about humanity's role in the cosmos. Scientists renewed efforts to explore space responsibly, emphasizing collaboration over competition. Even world leaders started talking about unity, not as an ideal, but as a necessity. Meanwhile, Leela returned to her quiet life. finding solace in simple routines. She kept the small shard of crystal Kale had given her tucked safely away, a reminder of the trust he had placed in her. Though she doubted she'd ever see him again, she often thought about him, wondering if he was watching humanity's progress from afar. One night, as she gazed up at the stars from her backyard, she felt a strange pull, a faint hum in the air that reminded her of the ruins. Turning slowly, she froze. Standing at the edge of her yard was Kale, his metallic frame glinting under the moonlight. His glowing eyes softened when they met hers. "You have done well, Leela Carter," he said, his voice low and resonant. "Your kind listens. They begin to understand." Leela blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. "Kale, how are you here?" "I am not bound by your rules of time and space," he replied simply. "I came to see the outcome of my choice, to trust you. And I am pleased." Tears welled in her eyes as relief washed over her. "Thank you for believing in us, for giving us a chance." Kale nodded once, his expression unreadable. "The path ahead will still be difficult. But remember this, you are capable of greatness. Do not let fear or doubt hold you back." Before she could respond, he turned and stepped backward into the shadows, vanishing as suddenly as he had appeared. Lila stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty spot where he had been. Then, with a soft smile, she turned her gaze back to the stars. The journey wasn't over, not for her, and certainly not for humanity. But for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful. Hopeful that they might truly rise to meet the challenges ahead. Hopeful that they could become something greater than they had ever imagined. And as she stood there beneath the endless sky, she whispered two words into the night. "Thank you."